I guess my answer to that question is I would never kill baby Hitler. If you can only support creators who provide value and make you think, please consider contributing to my Patreon page the next time you watch one of my videos. Hello everybody and welcome. So today I wanted to go a little bit more into the concept of evil. I know that I've talked about this one in a few videos, but it's one of those things that I continue to study and learn more about over and over and over again. In movies, and in books, like Marvel or superhero books or even things like the Bible, you have this concept of good versus evil, where there are two opposing forces that can never agree, and ultimately the concept that we want is that good always defeats evil. But as an author, I have constantly been studying the art of storytelling, and one of the things that they teach you, they being all these many writing instructors that are on the internet and I've found, they talk about how in order to make a truly intriguing villain, you need to make them relatable. As in, you need to, at least to a certain degree, understand their motivations so that you know where they're coming from, and because of that, you truly understand what's going on and why exactly a hero is needed, or why somebody needs to take them out. And that keeps you interested in both the protagonist and the antagonist, because you kind of relate to both, despite the fact that you know that the villain is wrong. And this has actually helped shape my perspective of how evil in reality really works. And personally, I don't believe in true evil, like that somebody is innately evil. I've said that in a previous video. It doesn't seem at all possible to me. And part of the reason why I believe this is because of the concept of, say, stepping into somebody else's shoes, walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. And because I've had to start looking into the psyche of my villains, I have to walk a mile in their shoes, essentially, which means I come up with rational explanations as to why they do the horrendous things that they do. And once you start doing that for a while, you actually start doing that with the people around you as well, where if somebody treats you badly, you start to go, okay, well, why would I do what they just did? What would bring me to that point? And you start to understand where they're coming from. So I know quite a few people who believe that evil is born or innate, or that, some people are just evil, they don't have a soul, and they can't be saved. Examples of this would be Hitler, and so on. But I don't even believe Hitler was innately evil. In philosophy, there's this concept of killing baby Hitler, and they say that there are two options. You can either kill baby Hitler, or you can not kill baby Hitler. If you decide not to kill baby Hitler, then they come back at you saying, well, but it's Hitler. How could you leave Hitler alive? And then on the other end of the stick, if you decide to kill Hitler, they're like, but he's just a baby. You don't know what he's going to turn out to be. And I guess my answer to that question is I would never kill baby Hitler. And the reason for that is I don't believe Hitler was born evil. I believe that the reasons he did the things that he did was largely out of fear. I believe he thought the world was so lacking in resources that he needed to help certain people survive. He chose the people he was going to help, and then he essentially did his best to eliminate the competition, which is actually a very common survival mechanism. I also think that he was a very angry man. Given what we know of his past, it seems like he had something of a difficult childhood, and, he had a lot of dreams crushed. He wasn't exactly admired for his talent in other fields, so it was natural for him to utilize a skill that he did have, to take on this kind of darker passion. And anger is a very strong emotion, really, so it can push you to do any number of terrible things. So combine his anger with his fear and his kind of belief that life can't get better and that it sucks. It's no wonder that he ended up doing something so terrible. I wouldn't be shocked if anybody else in that particular emotional state network would do the same thing. That's why it's so important for us to, start taking care of people's emotional health and, raising people to be self-aware adults, essentially. So, when it comes to evil acts, I know that many believe there are certain evil acts and so on and so forth, like murder. But we all know that killing is not always bad, as in war. Like, if you are at war, it's often considered a good thing to kill. Personally, I disagree. I don't think war should ever exist because violence breeds violence. Look at Romeo and Juliet. You got two warring families. Every kill has to be avenged kind of thing, so you're only actually creating more death. But we do believe that killing in war is correct. If you are on the side of right and somebody is standing in your way, it is correct to take them out of the picture. Similarly, if somebody, say, breaks into your house and tries to steal, by law, it is okay for you to defend yourself and your family from them. So if they come in and rob you at gunpoint and you shoot them, by law that is permissible. You killed them only out of self-defense. And while that is definitely an understandable reason to kill somebody, I still don't think it's right. So, whatever the case may be, though, you have killing, and murder is an aspect of killing. And we believe that in some scenarios, killing is correct, and in some, it is not correct. And even in this regard, I can agree, because I can totally understand why somebody would defend themselves. That's a natural impulse. I wouldn't call them evil for killing in that situation. I still don't think it's right, but I wouldn't call them evil. Now, murder is a little bit more challenging because, in many ways, that does appear to be a truly evil act. I think the reason, though, that we view it as such is because very few of us have ever tried to step into the feet of a murderer. And from what I've experienced in my simulated versions of a murderer's mind are things like intense fear, intense anger, hopelessness. I have never ever heard of a murderer who wasn't angry. And that is a really important fact in my brain, because if you're angry and you've been angry for such a long time, killing somebody would feel like a relief, because you finally get to release some of that pent-up, burning energy inside. So I can totally understand why somebody would murder. I probably could very easily get to that point if I held on to my anger for a really long time. I know how uncomfortable anger is. It's a very intense kind of burning sensation. Now, most of my emotions I feel in my throat. So for me, anger is a little bit like heartburn, but it's a deeper burning sensation. So it's kind of like I've got fire running down my spine. And when you have that feeling for such a long time, eventually you get to this irritated, kind of jumpy place where you just want to get it out for just a second, because it's so intense and it's so uncomfortable and it's so unnatural, really, for everybody. I mean, anger is not an unnatural emotion, but to hang on to it for such a long period of time definitely is. So you just want to get this feeling out. It's kind of like when you get food poisoning, you can't help but get it out. Your body does not want to hold on to that. anger is the same thing. The way that you release it, though, is going to depend entirely on your upbringing or on the scenario that you're in. If you blame somebody else for the issue in your life, more than likely you're going to take your anger out on them. Most of us do this by yelling or punching. That's a little more common among men. I believe it's also more common for men to be serial killers, though, so you might consider that aspect of it as well. But violence does seem to be a little more common with men. Women tend to be a little more verbal, which means that when it comes to expressing anger, women are more likely to yell, men are more likely to hit, although I do believe in both genders they're far more likely to yell than punch, but it is possible, So you need to release that anger in some way, and oftentimes that's going to come out in yelling. But if you have been yelling to release your anger all your life, it starts to lose its effectiveness. And I, for one, know the cathartic sense of release that comes from punching somebody, because I was a puncher when I was a little kid. And I kind of swore off punching when I was 7. But up to that point, it had been a highly effective way of resolving conflict. My sister would piss me off, I would punch her, conversation done, no more issues to deal with, other than maybe punishment for me later, which ironically was oftentimes a spanking, which only taught me that punching was a good way to punish. So, maybe not the best punishment for me, but whatever the case may be. So I understand the release that comes from physical violence. And I can only assume that if a punch can be that cathartic, murder could also be cathartic, and it could be even more so. So if you have a lot of anger built up, having to take all of that anger out on one person would probably mean that you will kill them. Now, there is also another aspect of murder, and this usually applies more to, say, serial killers. And that is kind of the cold and calculated aspect of it. And from what I understand of this individual, I believe it has more to do with loneliness. This is a concept that Teal Swan discusses a lot. She believes that loneliness is the biggest issue in our world. And personally, I view loneliness as just the symptom of a deeper problem, which is insecurity. But I can understand where she's coming from. Loneliness is a big issue. So when you are a serial killer, you calculate and kill several people, and oftentimes they're going to be strangers or look like somebody from your past. Or, if you have a problem with women, they're going to be women. If you have a problem with men, they're going to be men. If you have a problem with muscly people, it's going to be muscly people, whatever the case may be. So, in a way, it is still taking out anger. You're still trying to process through some deeper issue. But when it comes to that calculated kind of killing, I have the feeling that what the emotion they're dealing with the most is a feeling of numbness, which I don't know if everybody has experienced that feeling of numbness, but it's a very scary place. And it usually comes after long periods of depression. Personally, I've only really felt numb once in my life, and it was a truly terrifying situation. I mean, I didn't feel terrified when I was numb, but I think your mind and body naturally try to force you out of this numb state when you're in it. So my guess is that something within the body kind of eggs this person on so that they feel anything, and the most reliable way that they've found to feel something is through killing. Very powerful sensation, from what I understand of murder, is that you are in complete control of somebody else's life. You are the single most important person to them for at least the time it takes for you to kill them. And that is a very intoxicating concept, being that important and that vital to somebody. So it's not shocking to me that some people seek that out, in that particular method. So if I were to talk to, say, a serial killer, I would probably go in and say, well, why is it that you kill? And if they say something like, well, it makes me happy, then I'd be like, okay, well, what about it makes you happy? And they're going to give me some kind of specific answer. And then, more than likely, from what I believe is going to happen, is it's going to come out like they either enjoy the feeling of control, they enjoy the sensation of being vital or important in that person's life. And it's not necessarily that they'll say it in those words, but there are concepts that they could say that you're like, oh, okay, now I understand where you're coming from. And when it comes to control or importance, then you start asking questions like, well, is it possible for you to get that feeling by not killing? Is it possible for you to connect with another human in a non-violent, non-aggressive manner in order to reach that point? And the answer to that is going to be yes. The question is whether they can see it or not. More than likely, as a serial killer, they cannot at that point, but, as you work with them or something, you could slowly, you're building up a connection with them as, say, a counselor or, whatever the case may be, maybe even as a friend. But eventually they start to recognize that you are treating them like they are important. And one of the biggest issues that anybody is going to face is actually believing that they are important. And if you could start teaching, say, a serial killer that they are important and that they are worthwhile, they can start to see that other people are worthwhile and that they can be productive and helpful and, actually lead a joyous life, because more than likely these people have not been happy for a very long time either. And that happy feeling from killing somebody is actually a sense of relief, because for a second they jumped up to a higher state of emotion. So that's kind of everything that I wanted to talk about as far as evil goes today. I mean, I might expand on this a little bit more later, but I figure that's probably enough information for you guys to chew on a little bit. So thanks for watching. I hope you like, subscribe, and comment on this video, and I will see you again soon. Thank you.